I'm so excited to have what is usually one of our most viewed episodes of the year, which is when we have the rising juniors and outgoing seniors who serve as Paly and Gunn student board representatives on the webcast. So thank you all for being here at a busy time of the year. I thought I would start with some news. On Friday, Paly's student newspaper, the Campanile, came out with their last issue of the year, and they decided to do away with a longtime tradition of publishing a map that shows where students are going post-graduation, mostly college. And they decided to not publish it because they feel like it contributes to sort of a toxic culture, in their words, of competition and stress and pressure around sort of name brand schools. And so I was curious for the Paly students and the Gunn students, what your reactions were to that and sort of what the reaction has been like among students on campus to that decision.
You want to start?
Sure. I think that the decision was made in respect of all students on our campus, and it was the best option for ensuring that each student felt comfortable with their graduation and what their plans were for after graduation. The editors it was a tough decision, definitely. A lot of students look forward to that map each year. But I do agree with the decision and understanding that it benefits all students and makes students more comfortable with the decisions they're making without negative feedback from their peers.
No, yeah, I kind of agree. I think I respect their decision more than anything else because it is a tough one to make. It goes against the grain, so to say. But I think I would admit that the map does contribute to a little bit of toxicity around the college culture, checking names associated with name brand schools. And I think that data would have been better without the names personally, but I think it was a good choice overall to take it away. And I trust their judgment as editors.
And it sounds like at Gunn, that is the map that's published by, it must be the Oracle, is so no student names, but just this school and this number of students going there. Do you feel like that even in that form, the map has sort of a negative influence on students?
I'll go first.
I personally, I don't feel like there's such a big issue with the map at our school. I think taking away the name and not disassociating with the school takes away a lot of that kind of, because there's no more like competition in the sense. I think I do see like the argument about why we want to take away the name brand schools and all this toxicity around it. I also feel like there's like, on the other hand, like I feel like it kind of shows like the diversity of all the different options that students are exploring. Like there are students that are going to local schools, state schools, community colleges, and I think like it also like in a sense kind of encourages that because there's always like people that are like, okay, so there are people staying local. So I think it definitely goes both ways, and I think going back to what Carolyn said, like it's a tough call either way. And I think just if anything, like I respect and I trust whatever the administration is doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for as long as I can remember, Gunn has been doing just a map where it has all the different places people are going without names attached to it. And I think largely leaving names out of it can be beneficial. There's never really been controversy, as Claire said, about Gunn's version and the Gunn issue of the Oracle. And I think it just illustrates all the different options people have past high school, because it also talks about gap years, study abroad programs, other things people are doing besides college in this issue that we have for seniors.
I'm curious for the seniors if you've noticed any shift in the way people talk about college and what people are doing after high school, if there's more acceptance of alternative, sort of non-traditional plans over the course of your 4 years at Paly and Gunn.
Well, yeah, I'll take that one. I mean, I think at Paly for sure there's been a shift. I have two older siblings who've gone through Paly, graduating 2013, 2015, and I feel like the talk about alternative plans have been more positive for all students. I'm one and taking a gap year, and I chose to do that on my own, and have gotten so much acceptance from all the people in my community saying, wow, I wish I did that. And I think it's a select few people who contribute to negative aspects of the college process, but I would say overall the community is pretty accepting of where anyone's going after graduation.
Yeah, my siblings graduated Gunn like 10 and 11 years ago, and back then, gap years and alternative things after high school weren't really considered as options. I think it's gotten a lot better. Like when I hear like a friend or someone else saying they're taking a gap year, everyone's always really proud of them, asking questions about what they're doing, and seem to be really interested by it. I think largely a lot of the students do think gap years and other things after high school that aren't going to a four-year university immediately are really valuable options.
Yeah, that's great. And I think I spoke with the Campanile editors today, and they were saying, there is value in the map if it's not sort of contributing to that negative toxic culture. And in that, where you could see, 10 people are taking a gap year, and you might feel not as alone, or a junior who is going to make that decision the next year would then know it's sort of more acceptable and totally normal. I'm also curious, a huge story that hit locally and nationally this year was the college admissions scandal, and had a lot of local connections and just significance. I'm curious what you guys made of that news and sort of how you felt about it when that came out.
What's the start?
Oh,
You want to go?
as like someone that is going to go into the college admissions process, I think there's, it's definitely like disgruntling, I think, and also like frustrating to see that. And I feel like for me, it didn't come as much as actually, it definitely was a surprise that it was being done so like outrightly, I guess, or like just so directly. But I feel like I guess the college admissions process is really just like a black box. Like no one really knows what's going on in there. And so I'm sure there's a lot of injustices that occur within the college admissions process that are not being reported, And so I feel like I already had this existing, it's not very fair. We're probably the benefactors. We live in a very wealthy district that has great, academic success. So we're definitely already the benefactors. And so coming from that standpoint, it frustrates me. It doesn't surprise me to a very large extent. And I think this just goes to show this education system that is set up is not, helping those that really need to. And that, I mean, I don't know if I can really do anything about it. I'm still going to apply to college the way I was going to, before I heard the news.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it's good to see these things being exposed. I think it's good to discourage people from doing that. And I think it's good to show other people that this is a problem that exists.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it was really hard to tell, and I know that we've talked about this before, that the injustice that we saw kind of takes away from all the hard work that's been done in the past from all these admissions officers and all the people that run the SAT and all these proctors that are working so hard to ensure test security, and the actions of these few have kind of deterred from the important work that they've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
It also makes me wonder if it's really those few. I do believe, like you said, I'm not necessarily surprised because I do not think we live in a very, very just society. And I do think that there's other injustices happening that just aren't getting the media attention. They talk about the front door, the back door, and the side door. And, they're focusing on the side door, but there's still a lot of aspects in the college admissions that are the back door, like donating buildings. And, hey, that's convenient to getting your child in. And maybe that's not as looked down upon because you could argue you earned your place and you worked hard for the money to do that. But I think it happens all the time in many different ways, whether it be buying a building or some kids being able to afford tutors that can guarantee perfect scores, and some never seeing an SAT for the first time until they step into their first test. I'm not necessarily surprised, and I still think there's a lot more underneath it all.
Yeah, I think if there's a silver lining to it, it's that it's exposed that at a really prominent level, and people are really paying attention to it. And I think in a way that everyone's known that those issues have existed for a long time, but hopefully this is such an extreme case that's going to put more attention on those sort of more systemic problems. So I want to shift gears and talk about student voice, because as the representatives from your student bodies to the school board, that's sort of a lot of your roles. I'm curious for the outgoing seniors, sort of how you felt about how you were able to bridge that gap between what happens at the school district office and at the school board policy level and student experience at the ground at Gunn and Paly.
Yeah, I think students coming to open forums and talking about what they value or what they think is important is a really good start to this. I think this year we had students from both Gunn and Paly, as well as last year, talking about things that they deem is important. Last year we had some Gunn students talk about social studies courses. This year I think we had Paly students talk about the robotics program. We had some students talk about the dress code and just a bunch of different issues that came across all year. And I think an important step to breaking this gap is students realizing that the board isn't always going to be discussing the most important things for student opinions. Like, for example, a lot of the board items are administrative, financial, other things that really don't directly concern the student body, but students going to the board and I guess student leaders telling students what is being discussed at the board, what they can tell the board, is something that can bridge this gap.
Do you guys feel like students really have a seat at the table in decisions that the board makes about your lives, that affect your lives at school?
I would say yes. I think it's also goes hand in hand with what you make of your position, how persistent you are with the things you want to get done personally as a student board member. But I would say all the board members, Don Austin as well, like really, really care about our opinions. And Dr. Austin meets with us before every board meeting to get a sense of where we're at with the agenda items and what we think of it. And I think that's telling to the administration. They really do care about our opinion. But I think it also goes with what you said. It's students going to the board and picking out the issues they care about to bring up and really tackle.
Yeah.
Can I just add on the question? Like, I feel kind of coming from, so last year, like, I definitely went to the board and talked about, adding social science classes and other things. And I think, like, they are very receptive of when there's an issue being brought up, just like you mentioned. I think the harder part is kind of students are automatically a little bit at a disadvantage. We have courses on our back. Like, we have to go to school. We can't make the 11 o'clock night meetings, all the time. So, like, it takes extra effort to get the administration to do things, not because they aren't willing to, but because they also have things to do, and that's their entire job. Whereas us as students, we have like another bunch of stuff that we also have to do. So I think it's much harder, and I think students don't know that they can or they have the ability to do it. Like, the school board always listens during open forums, but I don't know many students that actually truly take advantage of it. So I think part of the role of student, like being a school board rep is, kind of just letting students know, like, they're willing to listen, and if you want to do that change, like, I'm going to support you, but also you have to be persistent about it and keep pushing for what you want to see.
Building off of that support, it's tough as a single student to come into one of these board meetings and push for this change. But next year, I'm sure Claire and I will be working towards supporting these students individually that do come in, and knowing that if we're going to go through this together, that we're going to have stronger results. And encouraging more students to come out and support each other is definitely very important.
Do either of you have specific priorities or issues that you really want to advocate for next year as student school board reps?
Absolutely. One of the things that Caroline mentioned briefly was the tutoring opportunities that some students have. It's an opportunity that those who can afford the tutoring very much benefit from. Next year, I'm hoping to implement a program that will provide free tutoring to students on the free and reduced lunch plan, and that goes outside of the your usual academic subjects and more into the SAT subject, SAT and ACT exams, where the tutoring at a private level is so expensive that providing these services for the students who can't afford it will raise test scores and boost campus in general.
Yeah, that's great.
I think on my end, I think there's a lot of talk in our school about expanding standard-based grading, and I know that there's a lot of controversial student opinion on that. So I think communicating that to the board, and I know this is more like a site administration thing, but I think definitely like that's something that should be talked about or at least brought to the attention. I think like adding on like Arjun always mocks me about this, but like I'm definitely like a very big like social science nerd, and I think there have been improvements that are being made, but so Gunn offers AP Human Geography now, but student enrollment is still low that they won't actually have that class being run. So I think part of it is we made the first step of increasing the offerings. I think the next step is making it more public. And I think also just going back to like showing students that these are different options that you should be taking, and even the visual arts program at Gunn. I think there has been some talk about students feeling like they weren't there. Like the administration was promising them to update their space, but I think that didn't happen. And I think some teachers went to I'm not even completely sure about this, but definitely like just exploring more options, encouraging students to take stuff that they're interested in, and giving more offerings and increasing interest. Yeah.
That just sort of sparked a question in my head about weighted grades, and I was wondering, so that was change in reporting weighted and unweighted grades was made 2 years ago, and I'm wondering if you guys saw an effect or felt any effect in terms of enrollment in electives or like students then choosing more of the weighted classes because they were worried about how it would affect their transcripts.
Yeah, I talked briefly about this last year on this seminar or webinar thing, but we have our new course, AP Lang, that we just finished our first year, and we have over 15 sections of AP Lang this year. And you can definitely see the difference because that was right after the weighted grades decision. And a lot of kids chose what it seems to take the AP instead of all the elective offerings that we have. And I think from the teacher's perspective, it was like evident even in like the engagement of the classroom and like the overall interest in specific electives kind of went down. That's just my opinion, but that's a direct campus thing that I noticed with the weighted grades.
Have you noticed any effect at Gunn?
Yeah, I don't think I've noticed any major negative or really positive effects from this decision. It was something that was really talked about when it happened, but since then it's kind of been replaced by other things that were talked about, like possibility of a computer science requirement, grad requirements, other things that have kind of taken more of the attention of students. Caroline's example, but AP Lang also is probably true for a lot of the AP courses at Gunn, especially situations like AP Economics and AP US History, where you're still required to take the course. Like, for example, you're still required to take US History and Economics, and in those cases, a lot of students who aren't necessarily directly interested in those subjects will opt to take the AP course because they essentially decide, well, I'm going to take this anyway, so I might as well get rewarded my transcript for it. And I don't necessarily have a strong position in that, but it's definitely something that causes really high enrollment numbers for the AP version of both those courses.
I'm curious, there's often conversations at the board level about wanting the experience at Paly and Gunn to be equal but also distinct. And like many years ago, there's issues with wanting the counseling programs to be more equivalent. What do you feel like is the most significant difference between the experience at Paly and Gunn?
I mean, there's that urban, like, I guess, stereotype, right? That, like, Paly's the athletic, Gunn's the academic. But I don't know, like, I feel like I haven't, like, really experienced, I don't know, like, that's just, like, I don't really feel like, I mean, I've never gone to Paly, so I guess I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's, like, any one specific factor that makes them different. I just think because they're two separate campuses, like, with their own traditions, their own events, even though, like, we do share a lot of the same events, like Homecoming, Spirit Week, I think over the years they've kind of like diverged as campuses with like different quirks, and I think that's the main difference. Like there isn't any one specific event or like policy change that makes them different. I think even if you do standardized things like counseling or like other things like weighted grades, that wouldn't necessarily magically make Gunn and Paly the same school. I think like the student body and school pride in each of those schools. Like at Gunn, there's a lot of pride about being Gunn. I'm sure the same is true at Paly. Pride of not being Gunn and pride of not being Paly, the two campuses. I think that's always going to be there.
Yeah, I agree with what both of you said, but I do think there's like a couple things that I wish we could align more on. Like you said, I do think the counseling system, more specifically in college area, because I think that this is sad to say, but I think the students at Gunn and Paly in the admissions process are competing against each other in a sense. And I do think that whatever policies at a more administrative level we implement should be aligned with like weighted grades, the counselor system for college, because how you guys get letters of recommendation with your, we have a TA, you guys have a counselor. I do think that could be beneficial to have both schools on the same page, just so we could equally prepare our seniors for the college admissions process. But otherwise, those type of things, I do think that Paly and Gunn are distinct and can have their own separate ways of doing things.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that looking at the schedules, each class schedule and Bell's schedule is interesting because I've heard that Gunn has a schedule that's all over the place and is difficult to understand.
To say the least.
The district should take a look at it and see, whether the Paly students or the Gunn students feel most comfortable with their schedules and which one, benefits the students most. and implementing, the same schedule across both schools would be best, so that I know, if I have a friend that I need to meet for a meeting, that our schedules align, and that, once again, the students feel most supported by the schedule that they're looking at.
For the seniors who are graduating next week, do you have any advice for your counterparts that are taking over this role next year?
I would just say make the most of your position. I think you have a really big platform to represent student voice on both of your campuses. And I think you could sit back and not make comments and not do your research on the agenda items, but the most imperative thing is doing the opposite, before every agenda, looking into each item and discussing it with your counterpart beforehand and getting a sense of your stance, just so you could most confidently represent your constituents. But I do think making the most of your position, being persistent with what you believe in, the achievement gap, you talk about that all the time, your goals too. I think whatever you want to change, you can do. You just have to put your mind to it and, bug Dr. Austin a little bit, say, can we get this on the agenda? Can I speak in open forum? Can I bring you into ASB to talk to our students? Just be persistent and make the most of your position, I would say.
Yeah, I think you shouldn't be afraid to disagree. Both of you clearly have goals that you want for this year, and as Caroline said, is having those goals throughout the year to kind of guide you in terms of for example, at every meeting, how does what I say here impact my ability to achieve those goals when you're planning on-campus events, stuff like that. I think these meetings can sometimes have a lot of people in the audience, and it can be intimidating to disagree with board members or disagree with what the entire group is saying. But I think since you are representing the student body, if the student opinion doesn't align with what's being said, then it is important to be able to speak out and disagree, even if it's not the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about? We could go on for hours.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. Congratulations on the 2 graduates.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys at board meetings next year.
Very much so.
Well, that's all for this week. If you liked what you watched, you can click subscribe below. And as always, we are at paloaltoonline.com and on social media, and you can follow all of our graduation coverage throughout next week. Thanks so much.